When 5 snakes were discovered in a pool, an incredible twist unfolded before the millionaire's son. Jack had never been one to shy away from adventure, but 5 snakes basking by his family's pool brought him face to face with the unexpected. Sunlight glinted off their slick scales, illuminating hues he'd never seen before. Instead of screaming like his friends might, excitement surged through him. This was a chance, wasn't it? The thrill of discovery. But as the initial rush settled, a nagging voice crept in. What would Dad say? Expectations and reality collided in his mind, and uncertainty began to overshadow his curiosity. Stepping closer, he scrutinized the snakes, their movements fluid yet deliberate. He felt a yearning to understand them, to identify this unknown species. This could be his moment to step beyond the gilded cage of privilege. Yet a dark shadow loomed. The consequences. His father's success hung over him like a thundercloud, and with every step toward the snakes, a knot tightened in his stomach. Could he even pursue a passion that didn't fit within the confines of his family's expectations? As he retreated, sweat mingled with self-doubt. Jack sat on the edge of the pool, watching the snakes soak in the sun. They were free, and yet he was trapped. The laughter of his friends echoed from the nearby basketball court, a world so far removed from the dreams brewing inside him. He was a millionaire's son, expected to glide effortlessly through life. But inside, he wrestled with the struggle to claim his identity. Would exploring the natural world be seen as frivolous? A joke played at the expense of an established legacy. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jack's heart raced at the thought of venturing deeper into this passion. But as he envisioned standing up to critics who saw him as a rich kid playing pretend, doubts clawed at him. The sophisticated executives of his father's company, the very people who believed in numbers and profit over nature, would see his research as a waste of time. Seizing this opportunity would mean pushing against the tide of expectations, risking the security of wealth and reputation dating back generations. He thought of Miss Clara, the retired herpetologist down the street. She believed in him. That supportive presence flickered like a candle against the winds of cynicism swirling amongst neighbors. Yet as visions of the snakes danced in his mind, the looming presence of corporate giants clad in suits and arrogance made him clench his fists. Could he really become the defender of these creatures? A part of him palpitated, a mixture of eagerness and dread. Each passing moment stretched the internal tension, leaving him grappling with his choices. With each breath, the weight of the looming confrontation with the corporation pressed down harder. Would he stand firm or shrink back? The serpents, in their silent vigil, seemed to ask him the very question pulsating in his veins. What does it mean to claim one's identity, and at what cost? Jack sensed the stakes rising, a murmur of urgency filling the air. He could feel the echoes of their hisses reverberating through the core of his being as he wrestled with the unknown, feeling something was about to snap. As the weight of expectation pressed harder, Jack's imagination wandered down a different path, a secret quest to uncover the truth behind the serpents, to transform them from mere creatures basking on marble into symbols of his own emancipation. If he could just grasp their essence, understand their intricate lives, maybe he could unravel his own tightly knit existence. The pull was magnetic, each thought recording details about their vibrant patterns, their graceful movements. The yearning to know more intensified, eclipsing the hesitations lodged in his mind. He resolved to venture to Miss Clara's home. Her small, cluttered workshop brimmed with books on reptiles and scientific equipment, a sanctum of knowledge starkly contrasting the polished boardrooms of his father's empire. Every inch had been carved from a life dedicated to understanding the mysterious world he craved to join. Still, stepping through her door brought a familiar wave of doubt. Would she see the budding researcher in him, or merely a misguided child of affluence chasing whims? Miss Clara greeted him with warmth, her silver hair reflecting wisdom. Jack's heart pounded against his ribcage as he presented her with his thoughts about the snakes. She listened intently, her eyes sparkling with encouragement as he catalogued the colors and behaviors he noticed. They were no ordinary snakes. They were extraordinary, he insisted. They could symbolize not just their kind, but perhaps a way forward for him, a bridge between his past and an uncharted destiny. "Curiosity is a powerful tool, my boy," she said, her voice coaxing confidence from deep within him. "Follow it with honor, and you may find how much of a gift you truly possess. The world needs defenders, yes, but it also needs those brave enough to question tradition." Her words hung in the air, weaving a tapestry of possibility that wrapped around his racing thoughts. Jack spent hours in her workshop that day, devouring books, examining specimens in jars, learning about ecosystems and conservation. Each snippet of knowledge fueled a fire within him, igniting a passion that had been suffocated under the weight of familial expectations. He sketched diagrams of the snakes and sketched plans for a possible community awareness initiative. What if he organized nature walks to educate his affluent neighborhood about local wildlife? The mere thought sent electrical surges through his veins, invoking a mix of bravery and fear. Back home, however, a familiar gloom loomed. His father's disapproving gaze was etched into Jack's mind, a constant reminder of the legacy he was supposed to uphold. Could he dare to tread this new path? Could he become a herpetologist and fight for these snakes instead of stepping into the polished shoes of an executive? The truth settled heavily upon his chest. Each question danced around him, a whirlwind of consequence and desire. His friends continued to play carefree basketball, a reminder of the life he had known but was beginning to dissolve like mist. Jack felt the tremors of change ripple through him, a sign he had to choose his next steps carefully. Miss Clara's words reverberated. "A gift is only as powerful as the courage of the giver." The following days melded into an intense mix of emotion, ambition, and instability. As he stood at a crossroads, he knew the time would come to confront his father and his plush, anxiety-laden expectations. Every crack of sunlight against the pool's surface seemed to echo the call of transformation. He was caught, toes poised over the line between privilege and passion, each moment a tick towards a decision that could alter the course of his life irrevocably. Yet the snakes, with their sinuous grace, were waiting, plotting and plying their own paths. What awaited him if he plunged into the depths of this new purpose? The stakes grew ever higher, and the tension clutched at Jack's heart, whispering words of rebellion against the legacy that sought to contain him. The moment had arrived to face the daunting shackles of expectation. Would he emerge a courageous defender of nature, or would he recede into the shadows of his father's ambitions? Jack could feel the past pulling at him like a tide, but the future shimmered with promise cloaked in uncertainty. The pivotal confrontation loomed ahead, eclipsing all else. Doubt wrapped itself around Jack like a coiling serpent, squeezing tight as he paced the marble floors of his home, eyes flickering to the family portraits hung up like trophies. Each one captured the essence of expectation, smiles signifying accomplishment, a lineage of business prowess that lay heavy on his shoulders. In that moment he made a decision to confront his father and unveil the ambitions that burned inside him. He rehearsed their conversation repeatedly, his mind racing as he paced. He had to communicate his passion authentically, to portray not just a rebellion, but a genuine desire to protect the environment. Yet fear sunk deep into him, the polished surfaces reflecting not only privilege, but all the failures that could stem from his father's wrath. What if that rage extinguished the flame of his newfound passion? What if his father saw him not as a son, but as a disappointment? Determined to consolidate his thoughts, Jack turned back to the sketches he had made in Miss Clara's workshop. The intricate patterns of the serpents danced off the page like ideas yearning to break free. Perhaps nature walks weren't just a whim, they could be educational outreach, a way to bridge his affluent world with the preservation of the wildlife that mesmerized him. This initiative could spark change, allowing others to see what he saw, the intrinsic beauty and importance of these creatures. Despite the surge of inspiration, the real world loomed, a stark juxtaposition to his abstract dreams. With a knot in his throat, he finally approached his father's study, a room filled with the scent of leather and the weight of decisions that shaped their family legacy. Each step felt like a plunge into uncertainty, a risk undertaken to forge an entirely new narrative. Knocking softly, he heard a deep voice beckon him in. Jack braced himself, tightening his grip on the sketches as he walked into a domain of power and expectation. His father looked up from his desk, the dim light illuminating a face that offered little reassurance. "What is it, Jack?" The tone was businesslike, and Jack's heart sank under the weight of his father's gaze. "Dad, I need to speak with you about my future." The words stumbled out, hesitant yet resolute. There was no going back now. His father raised an eyebrow, the corners of his mouth tightening. "You've got everything laid out for you. College, the firm. Why are you struggling with this?" "I want to study herpetology." As soon as the words left his lips, Jack felt a shiver run down his spine, a confession wrapped in a challenge. "I want to work with snakes, to educate others about wildlife, to do something I'm passionate about." Silence wrapped around them like a thick fog. Jack's breath caught as he awaited the inevitable reprimand. The ticking clock amplified the tension between them, heartbeats quickening in a mutual struggle. "Snakes?" His father's voice dripped with disbelief. "You mean to tell me you want to throw away your future for, what, a hobby?" "No, Dad, it's not just a hobby, it's important." Jack felt the fury bubbling inside him, fear teetering dangerously close to anger. "Miss Clara taught me so much. I want to make a difference, to show people these animals matter just as much as the bottom line. You think this is some whimsical dream? You'll never take me seriously as a businessman like this," his father barked. "Do you have any idea what you're giving up?" Jack could almost hear the chains clinking as his father's words echoed in his mind. But amidst the chaos, the clarity of his resolve surged forward. I don't want to give up. I want to forge my own path. You raised me to be strong, to think critically, but I can't just inherit a legacy I don't believe in." The room froze, the air charged like a storm waiting to break. Jack's heart raced, a torrent of emotion sweeping through him as he stood there, vulnerable yet unapologetically firm. This was his moment of truth. But would it fuel his fight, or suffocate him in the weight of family legacy? As uncertainty hung heavily in the air, Jack realized this was only the beginning of the confrontation he'd long avoided. The snakes still swirled in his thoughts, each representing a choice, a pathway waiting to be forged. What if he stepped further into this world of research and conservation? Would he find acceptance for who he truly was, or would the legacy crush him under its weight? The moment of resolution loomed, but the answers remained tantalizingly out of reach. The silence between them stretched ominously as Jack's heart drummed in his ears. His father's expression shifted, a storm of emotions brewing just beneath the surface. Disappointment, disbelief, maybe even a flicker of concern. Jack had always been the dutiful son, groomed to take over the family empire. But today he stood on the precipice of a different future, one defined not by expectations, but by his own conviction. "Do you understand the world you're talking about?" His father's voice laced with frustration. "You think you can waltz into some university lab, make a few friends, and suddenly have the credentials to chase after a dream?" Jack felt the familiar coils of doubt tightening around him again, but fought against it. "It's not just a dream, Dad. It's a necessity. The world is changing, and we need to be part of that change. Maybe I can even help bridge that gap between business and conservation." His father leaned back, assessing Jack with an expression that toggled between curiosity and caution. "And how exactly do you plan to achieve that? What's your grand strategy?" It was the challenge Jack needed. This was not merely about the reptiles. It was about creating a purpose that resonated with others, about nurturing a burgeoning passion into something that could bring awareness and change. "I could start with educational programs, workshops at schools, collaborating with local organizations. I could organize community outreach that showcases the importance of biodiversity and conservation methods. It's not just about snakes, it's about an ecological awareness that hasn't been prioritized." For a moment, Jack could see a flicker of intrigue in his father's eyes. Could it be possible? Had he tapped into something his father deemed valuable? Educational outreach? His father was transforming skepticism into contemplation. Jack sensed a fragile thread of possibility weaving through their conversation. "And you think people will just embrace this idea?" "I know they will," Jack asserted, leaning in with newfound confidence. "People care about the environment, they just don't know how to connect with it. My family has the resources to make a real impact, to lead by example. It doesn't have to be at odds with what you believe." His father's expression hardened, the protective wall re-erecting. "What I believe is essential for your future, Jack. You can't just push aside decades of business for feel-good initiatives. You need a practical approach." Disappointment flickered momentarily through Jack's veins, but was promptly overcome by a growing resolve. "I want to innovate, Dad. I can't just sell what's expected. I want to make an imprint, something lasting, something good. Business doesn't have to be about the bottom line. It can be about building a legacy of awareness and responsibility." The tension between father and son escalated as their convictions clashed. Jack's heart raced with each word he fought to voice against the suffocating legacy looming over him. The stakes felt towering. The ground beneath his feet felt ever more unstable. "What if I fail?" he thought, each question spiraling through his mind like a ballet of snakes escaping their confines. But beneath that fear was a stark clarity. Success wasn't the only outcome he sought. It was the journey, the initiative to rise above convention, and the possibility of inspiring change. The silence enveloped them once more. The lingering questions of doubt were overshadowed by a clarity beyond Jack's comprehension. Perhaps there was strength in vulnerability, in forging a path that seemed improbable, yet profoundly necessary. He took a step closer to his father's desk, grounding himself. "I don't want to simply follow a predetermined path. I want to traverse my own, and I need your support to do it." Jack's plea hung heavily in the air, shimmering with hope. He had announced his ambition. Now came the moment that would determine if he would be branded a failure by his father's unforgiving measure, or be embraced as a pioneering spirit. The exchange melted into a vulnerable stillness, their glances exchanged as both wrestled with the enormity of the decision at hand. Would his father recognize his potential and passion for what it could achieve? But just as a glimmer of acceptance sparkled in the elder man's eyes, a sudden commotion outside shattered the tension. An urgent voice called out from the driveway, demanding attention. Jack's pulse quickened. It felt like the turning point was slipping from his grasp, the fragile hope of acceptance overshadowed by the entanglements of unexpected circumstances. "What now?" his father grunted, growing impatient, but Jack sensed an unraveling opportunity beyond the walls of the study. His mind raced with speculation, each possibility more thrilling than the last. What revelation awaited him outside, and would it mark the culmination of his aspirations or the potential for greater conflict? The moment stood suspended in time, a delicate balance teetering between ambition and legacy, as he took a leap into the unknown. The commotion outside escalated, voices raised in urgency, as Jack turned on his heel and moved swiftly toward the door. His heart raced in a different rhythm now, the earlier confrontation forgotten as curiosity mingled with anxiety. What lay beyond this threshold could alter everything, possibly providing him with a pivotal opportunity or throwing him deeper into confusion. As he stepped into the sunlight, the vibrant colors of the garden seemed muted by the tension mounting within him. A small crowd had gathered near the pool, their animated gestures cutting through the calm landscape. Jack's father followed closely behind, irritation etched across his features. Jack thrust himself through the sea of intrigued faces, his ambition momentarily sidelined by the unfolding chaos. Then he saw them, 5 snakes shimmering in the pool's reflection, each one twisting through the water like dancers in a macabre ballet. Their scales glistened under the sun, captivating the onlookers who were both fascinated and horrified. Emotions swelled around him. Awe, fear, and the unmistakable thrill of the unknown charged the air. "Look at that!" shouted a boy on the edge of the group. "They're all different. They're beautiful." Jack's pulse quickened as he took a step closer. "Wait," he exclaimed, his voice rising above the chatter. "Let's not crowd them. If they're stressed, they'll react defensively." Instinctively, he moved to get a better view, cautiously eyeing the creatures that had, in an unexpected twist, thrust him back into the world he yearned to enter. His mind raced. This was not just a random incident. It was an incredible opportunity for education and awareness. How could he utilize this moment? This could serve as the perfect case study for his outreach initiatives, a tangible connection to spark interest and conversation about reptiles and conservation. His father stood at his side, arms crossed, peering with skepticism. Jack turned to him, excitement bubbling beneath his composed exterior. "This is it, Dad. An opportunity to educate people right here, right now. Imagine the dialogues we can create about ecological balance." But his father merely shook his head. "This isn't a zoo, Jack. You can't just play the hero because some snakes unexpectedly showed up. You're in over your head." The disappointment crept back into Jack's chest, but it was quickly overridden by the growing determination within him. What would it take for his father to see the value of outreach? With the snakes as a backdrop, he saw potential, an uncanny intersection of curiosity and alarm that could spark genuine connections. "Look," Jack said, turning away from his father's skepticism. He addressed the crowd instead, stepping forward. "Let's not panic. These snakes are here, and we need to respect their space. But also, think of how this can teach us about their role in our ecosystem. Who's willing to learn more with me?" The crowd shifted, surprise flickering in the air as he engaged them directly. Some parents nodded, intrigued by his budding confidence, while others exchanged glances that hinted at burgeoning interest. He was no longer just a millionaire's son. He was a voice advocating during a moment that mattered. In that instant, a realization dawned on him. Leading by example required action, not merely words. If he could harness this unexpected event, he could show his father the impact of his vision while potentially igniting a community awareness he craved. Jack seized the moment, pointing to the snakes splashing in the pool. "We can organize workshops, inviting experts to discuss these species and how we can protect their habitats. It could be informative and engaging for the whole neighborhood." His father's expression fluctuated, a mixture of incredulity and a grudging appreciation. Perhaps, just perhaps, Jack's impulse had some merit. But the elder man's skepticism remained, and the shadows of doubt hadn't entirely lifted. Jack's heartbeat echoed louder than his father's judgment, yet he felt empowered to keep pushing forward. "Let's do this," Jack urged, watching as more children shuffled toward him, their curious eyes sparkling. "Together, we can make a difference right here, in our own backyard." The crowd began to take shape around him, anticipation crackling in the air. This was more than a mere advisory. It was a potential turning point in Jack's journey. He could leverage this moment, catapulting his fledgling ambitions into an undeniable reality. Yet as he looked back toward the house, he sensed his father's lingering reticence. A wall built out of years of business tradition and reluctance ran deep. How could he convince his father that the path to innovation was paved with uncertainty and risk? Jack knew he had only begun to carve out his identity, and the snakes had sparked something profound. As the conversations around him flourished, Jack felt his drive propelling him forward, yet the shadows still loomed. Did he have the strength to dismantle the legacy weighing him down? The stakes felt higher than ever. His future was beginning to germinate, nourished by a chaotic pool of serpents. But he needed more than just a temporary distraction. He needed the strength to confront his father's apprehension head-on. Jack took a deep breath, readying himself for the conversation that would define their relationship. "Let's show them what we can achieve together," he said quietly, beneath the weight of expectations, his resolve hardening like steel. It was time to stand firm against doubt, both his own and his father's, and his. What would happen when he returned to confront his father, and was he prepared to challenge the very foundation of their legacy? Just as the questions pressed against him, another voice drifted over the gathering, promising confrontation. "Hey, are you even considering the danger? What if they bite?" The question landed heavily, overshadowing Jack's new initiative, a wave of doubt crashing into him anew. Would he find the strength to rise in that moment, or would the reality of his dreams slip through his fingers like sand? As uncertainty gripped him, the line was drawn. The time had come to face what lay beneath both the surface of the water and the complicated relationship with his father. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and menacing. Jack felt its weight settle in his chest, a reminder of everything he was trying to overcome. The boy's voice echoed in his mind, piercing through the excitement that had just begun to take root. What if they bite? The fear was palpable, and he could feel the tension in the faces surrounding him tightening like a noose. What if they bite? Echoed through his thoughts. The doubt pulsed, a powerful force threatening to consume him. Did he really have what it took to rise above this moment, to transform this chaos into a beacon for education and respect for wildlife? Could he mold the energy around him into something meaningful, or would he become just another fleeting voice drowned in fear? Jack steeled himself, pushing aside the unsettling thought that lingered after the boy's question. Yes, there's a risk, he called to the crowd, heart pounding beneath his composed facade. But there's also an opportunity. Every living being has its place in this world. We need to learn about them before we jump to conclusions. Faces softened, a ripple of contemplation meandering through the crowd. Jack's resolve shifted the atmosphere, transforming fear into intrigue. But he couldn't ignore the prickling discomfort at his side. He glanced at his father, whose disapproval cast a long shadow over Jack's aspirations. Look, everyone, Jack continued, focusing his energy back on the crowd. I know snakes might seem dangerous, but they are incredible creatures. Their presence can inform us about biodiversity and the state of our environment. If we approach this with knowledge and respect, we can learn so much. The murmurs around him began to change. He saw approval reflected in the eyes of some parents, yet skepticism still loomed in others. In that moment, Jack realized that he needed more than just words. He needed to convert his thoughts into action, to formulate a plan that would leave an impression, particularly on his father. Let's gather here later today, he suggested. We can create signs, and I'll reach out to a local expert on snakes. I want everyone to see that knowledge is the real antidote to fear. As murmurs of approval mixed with hesitation rippled through the crowd, he thought of how he'd have to battle even harder to convince one very important person, his father, who remained largely unmoved, rooted in old beliefs that defined his success. Jack turned to his father, ready to bridge the gap. Dad, think of this like marketing. Remember how we created that initiative to raise funds for the community? This could be a new approach, an engaging way to build understanding. If I'm successful, maybe we could even expand the outreach beyond just this neighborhood. His father's gaze remained steadfast, but something flickered in his expression, a crack in the armor of indifference. Jack felt a surge of hope, but hesitated. Was he willing to risk everything he had, including his father's respect, in pursuit of redefining their legacy? Jack, his father finally spoke, voice low yet firm. This could end badly. Ignoring the danger won't make it disappear. Jack met that challenge head-on, fueled by the adrenaline coursing through him. But isn't protecting the creatures that inspire us worth the risk? Aren't you tired of sticking to the same strategies? Sometimes we need to upend expectations and face the unknown. The silence that followed hung thick in the air, tension sparking between them. Jack felt his heart racing, an electric pulse that surged through him. He yearned to speak truths that would uproot his father's fears, but fought against the instinct to retreat. As he stood there, surrounded by the curious crowd, a realization dawned. This moment was pivotal, not just for the gathering around him, but for him and his father. Let's turn this fear into a foundation for learning together, he urged, hoping to inspire. Let's show how we can celebrate nature's beauty while promoting safety. It was a carefully curated invitation, one that blended respect for his father's experience with the fiery passion he felt for his newfound purpose. Yet as Jack stared into his father's unreadable expression, a nagging doubt clawed at him. Would he get the validation he desperately sought, or would tradition silence his ambitions yet again? He felt caught in a tempest of conflicting emotions, setting him up for a confrontation that would define everything he hoped to achieve, not only as an advocate for conservation, but as a son longing for his father's approval. The air around him crackled with potential, and just as he began to breathe hope into the moment, another voice interjected from the crowd, a challenge hanging like a guillotine. Why should we trust you, Jack? What if this all turns into a big mistake? The words sent Jack spiraling, forcing the weight of doubt back onto his shoulders. Would he allow fear to dictate the future, or would he rise to the occasion? The stakes had never felt more pronounced. How would he balance ambition and risk? passion, and skepticism, in the endeavor that could either make or break him. Jack felt the sharpness of the voice cut through him, as if it had exposed a raw nerve. The crowd's attention shifted, eyes darting between him and the speaker, leaving him in an arena of scrutiny. For a heartbeat, he wrestled with the vulnerability that surged within. Doubt and determination battled fiercely in his mind. "Why should we trust you?" the voice had asked. Jack's heart raced as he gathered his thoughts. The trust he sought was a prize locked behind a wall of skepticism, old beliefs fortified by a lifetime of tradition. But he recognized a challenge when he heard one, and he had a choice: retreat into silence or confront it head-on. "I get it," Jack started, his voice gaining strength. "I really do. Trust doesn't come easy, but let's think about it. How much do we really know about what we fear? Isn't it time we take a step back and reassess?" Slowly, he collected his thoughts and complaints within. It was crucial to display not only confidence, but a willingness to share, to impart. This endeavor was more than personal ambition. It was about creating a receptive space for growth. Let's take it step by step. If we're going to make a stand on these misconceptions, we have to have a foundation of trust, right? I'm planning this initiative not just as a way of fighting fear, but also as a means to connect with nature, with each other. Each word felt more charged, building momentum. Jack scanned the reluctant faces of the crowd. A surprising number looked back at him, unwilling to dismiss the spark of curiosity ignited within them. He leaned into that flicker, shaping it into something tangible. "What if we hosted a small demonstration?" Jack proposed, the idea blossoming in his mind. "We can invite that expert I mentioned, maybe a wildlife biologist. They can provide first-hand insights about snakes, their roles in the ecosystem, and even debunk some myths." The shift was palpable. He saw heads nodding, expressions softening. A new rhythm emerged in the air, allowing Jack to breathe a little deeper. The disapproval from his father still lingered, but Jack refused to let it bind him. "With the right knowledge, we can normalize the discussion around these creatures. We can learn to respect and protect them rather than fear them." The crowd was murmuring now, considering the proposition, but Jack needed to seal this momentum. "And if it fails?" The original challenger's voice loomed again, heavy with skepticism. "What if nothing changes?" Jack's courage faltered momentarily, but he shook it off like a weight. He was intensely aware of the personal risk involved, not just the initiative's potential failure, but the fear of disappointing his father, of betraying tradition. Still, he chose to lean into vulnerability. "What if it does change lives? Maybe even my father's perspective?" He noticed the irked expression on his father's face, and the silent question embedded in those narrowed eyes. Would he finish what he started? "Failure is part of this journey," Jack continued, his voice steadier than before. "But giving into fear means we lose an entire opportunity for growth. It's about creating an environment where dialogue and knowledge can flourish. We can educate our kids, ourselves. That's a chance worth taking in my book." The crowd was shifting now, spirits consistently edging from doubt to tentative enthusiasm. People exchanged glances, contemplating the weight of Jack's words. The energy pulsated around him like an electric current, urging him to push harder. Jack turned once more to his father, heart pounding with resolve. "Dad, I know this feels risky, but we have to evolve. We can't just stand by and relegate the next generation to outdated fears. We owe it to them to show what else is out there." For a fleeting moment, recognition sparkled in his father's eyes. Jack could see the countless battles fought behind that stern facade. He could see both willingness and refusal warring within the man he admired, a man he yearned to connect with beyond their differing ideologies. As the crowd's murmurs grew in urgency, Jack felt the urgency burgeoning within himself, grasping tightly to the fragile bridge erected between his unyielding need for approval and the passion that now overwhelmed him. "Let's champion this together," Jack said, extending the olive branch both to the crowd and his father, confrontation now transformed into an invitation for collaboration. "Today, let's turn our fears into respect for wildlife. Let's learn how to coexist." Just as he thought hope had begun to blossom, a new voice sliced through the air, urgent and foreboding. "What about the imminent danger? You're placing everyone at risk." Those words echoed ominously in Jack's mind, a gnawing reminder of the struggle ahead, a fresh challenge to navigate. Would he be able to rally trust amidst fear, or was he simply setting a stage for another fall? The question hung heavy, and Jack felt that he needed to face whatever would come next, not just from others but from within himself. The tension in the air shifted as silence enveloped the crowd after the sharp interjection. Jack's heart raced, echoing the doubt swirling inside him. He could feel the murmurs of fear intensifying, each whisper wrapped in concern. He studied the faces around him. They bore the weight of anxiety, transformed by the lingering shadow of danger. He wrestled with the weight of the accusation, the skepticism that had been thrust upon him like a gauntlet. It echoed his father's unspoken disappointment, a reminder of just how deeply rooted tradition could be. Jack felt the pressure mounting, not only from the crowd but from the conflicting tides within his own mind. Was he foolish to push ahead? How could he quell these fears when he himself felt the tremors of uncertainty? "Every day we encounter things that may seem frightening," Jack started, his voice steadier despite the chaos roiling inside. "Unsafe situations are everywhere. It's how we choose to engage with them that determines outcomes. Instead of backing away, what if we face them head-on? Isn't that how we truly take control of our fate?" He could see the flicker of understanding amidst wary faces, but the original challenger maintained a skeptical glare. "You're talking about risks, Jack. Risks that don't just involve you, but all of us. We have a right to protect ourselves." Jack swallowed hard, retreating deep into his thoughts. That statement resonated with both valid concern and a personal reflection. He pondered moments in his own life when fear had dictated his choices, times when he had clung to the familiar, allowing opportunities to slip through his fingers. It was a harsh truth, mesmerizing in its audacity, realizing how often he had allowed fear to dictate his path. True safety often means confronting our fears. It's in understanding these creatures that we learn to coexist with them, Jack replied, each word carving a deeper path toward conviction. This wasn't just about snakes anymore. It was about challenging the narratives they lived by, the fears that had held them captive for too long. This was a fight for awareness and against ignorance. He felt a pulse of energy driving him forward. "I'm not saying it won't be hard," he added, a deliberate resolve building in his chest. "We may stumble and we may even fail in this initiative, but can we really afford to let fear dictate our existence? What if our actions could save a life? Perhaps even enlighten a misguided view, maybe even my own father's?" He spotted the flicker of something in his father's eyes, a mixture of apprehension and interest. That glimmer urged Jack onward, giving his restless heart a newfound strength. He wasn't seeking validation, but rather an opening for dialogue, a bridge between their worlds. With determined clarity, he raised his voice higher. "I propose we assess any potential dangers, rapidly address them, and proceed with the right knowledge and precautions. Together, we can create a guide to better understand these dangers. In that understanding, we build both safety and respect." The crowd began nodding, uncertainty gradually giving way to a shared sense of curiosity. He noticed faces transforming from skeptics to allies, shifting towards hope. Jack ran his fingers through his hair, a surge of exhilaration mixing with the fear still echoing within him. "Let this be a dialogue," he urged. "Engage with it. Let's create a platform where we can openly discuss fears, educate ourselves, excite the next generation about what it means to coexist with our surroundings. Together, we have the power to change the narrative." The initial challenger still held a semblance of doubt, but now Jack could see the cracks forming in the wall of skepticism, a flicker of something resembling intrigue. It might not be the perfect solution, but it was a start, a leap into the murky waters of unfathomable potential. Yet deep within, Jack felt the shadow of uncertainty still loomed. The question remained, would he be able to transform this growing momentum into an enduring legacy? Was he truly prepared to lead this charge, or were these merely empty words echoing in a cavernous void? As Jack contemplated the daunting journey ahead, he felt the gravity of his initiative weighing heavily on his shoulders. Facing the potent mixture of wild expectation and scrutiny, he knew he had to navigate this precarious path. Just as he was beginning to believe in his collective potential, another voice, trembling yet assertive, interjected, "What if we end up making it worse?" The challenge loomed, inviting him to confront his own fears again. Would Jack choose to advance into the unknown, or would he pull back into the safety of the established order? Only time would tell, but the stakes had never felt higher. Jack's thoughts raced as he faced the question that hung in the air like a storm cloud. The voice that challenged him belonged to Janet, a childhood friend whose father had lost their family farm to a snake infestation. Her deep-seated fear and concern were palpable and resonated with the crowd around them. He felt the urgency within himself swell, a scramble to not only deflect the doubt, but also to grab hold of an opportunity for transformation. This wasn't merely about snakes. This confrontation was his battleground. But he could sense an undercurrent of resentment beneath the surface of Janet's words, and it tightened his throat. "What if we do make it worse?" he repeated softly, as if weighing the enormity of her concern. "We might stumble, yes, but everything we learn in the process is growth, right? What if understanding these creatures could not only save our lives, but also bridge past divides?" The crowd was silent, the tension reflecting back to him. In their eyes he could read curiosity interspersed with fear, an emotional cocktail that fueled his determination. He encountered the frustrated fidgeting of his own hands and felt a hot surge of anger rising. How could they continue to be prisoners of their fear? Was he truly ready to lead them into this new understanding? As if in response to his own questions, an image flitted across his mind, his father's hard eyes softening, perhaps even warming to this new narrative. The man who had shaped so much of what he was, often through fear and duty, could be swayed. Jack's heart quickened at the prospect. "I refuse to let fear shape our destinies anymore. It's like living with chains. We exist but never thrive." He found himself gesturing passionately, the words falling seamlessly from his lips. "And as uncomfortable as it feels, it is in confronting our fears that we find growth." Janet's eyes narrowed. She still hesitated. "You're talking about understanding, Jack, but what if our understanding leads to naive assumptions? It could be dangerous." The eyes of onlookers flickered between the two, uncertain of where to land. "Then let's take the risk of understanding together, with the purpose of crafting a better approach. We will research, and we will immerse ourselves in education rather than avoidance. Allow me to lead, and I promise I won't sugarcoat the reality. Let's gauge our situation with knowledge, not ignorance," Jack pressed. It was a risk he had never imagined taking, addicted as he had been to the familiar routines of his upbringing. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to back down, to promise safety through silence. Yet another voice, the one that pulsed with longing for change, spoke louder than the rest. A flicker of realization ignited in him. Leadership wasn't rooted in perfect answers, but in grasping the complexity of uncertainty. Perhaps he was evolving into a leader not through positions of power, but through a willingness to engage with vulnerability, his and theirs. The crowd began to murmur, a symphony of voices joining slowly. Jack held his breath, considering that suddenly they were all navigating uncharted waters together. He realized he wasn't just unmoored, he was creating something new, transforming fear into an awakening of collective power that tethered them through understanding. "I want to create a task force to address these issues, to educate ourselves so we can mitigate fears rather than letting them rule us," Jack declared, hope surging in him. Could he actually lead them to truly confront their fears? But as he felt a flicker of victory, Janet's voice sliced through again, making the hairs on his neck stand on end. "And what about the risks we do understand? Are your plans actually listening to the danger outside of idyllic thoughts of unity?" The ominous return to caution settled over him like a chill, and doubt crept back in. Was he letting blind optimism guide him into a trap? Jack had no choice but to decide. Would he solidify this breakthrough, or invite the shadows of overconfidence to loom over him? The decision rested on his shoulders, and time would reveal if his blossoming resolve could withstand the coming storm. Each moment inched forward, encapsulated in tension, as Jack stood poised to embrace the dawn of a new chapter. The crowd, once knitted with skepticism, had begun to soften, revealing glimmers of curiosity ignited by his impassioned advocacy. With every word he uttered, Jack felt a surge of conviction grow deeper roots within him, a realization that he was not merely rebelling against his father's heritage, but rather carving a new legacy, one intertwined with purpose and genuine connection. "I acknowledge the risks." Jack took a deep breath, each exhale a release of the doubt that still clung to him. "But isn't understanding the true essence of coexistence crucial for us all?" His gaze swept the congregation, seeking connection as he spoke, steadying the tumult within. "Instead of succumbing to fear, we have the power to educate ourselves and develop a plan that takes everyone's concerns into account." Janet's eyes flickered with nuance, torn between caution and the budding intrigue sparked amongst those gathered. Jack pressed on, allowing the ember of inspiration kindled by the snake's presence to guide him. "Let's host discussions, hold workshops. We can invite experts to walk us through our fears, answer our questions, and reveal the beauty inherent in their existence. These snakes, these creatures that have thrived in this very environment long before we did." His voice resonated like a rallying cry, and Jack observed the crowd's shift, the moment poised delicately between acceptance and apprehension. He sensed his father watching intently, the harsh lines of skepticism beginning to smooth ever so slightly as recognition flickered across his face. Could he see potential in this endeavor after all? Imagine kids from our neighborhood learning about local wildlife, developing respect instead of fear, Jack continued, emboldened by the brewing energy around him. Nature doesn't have to be an enemy. We can rescue these perceptions and transform them into a source of pride. Jack's own pulse quickened, sensing a shift in the air, reflecting the desires that intertwined their lives. Yet the shadow of defeat lingered, cloaked in the potential pitfalls ahead. He knew that achieving this vision wouldn't come easy. Would his newfound ambition be enough to soften the rigid expectations that bound him? "Jack, if we're going to face this," Janet's voice remained measured, "we need a clear plan, not just enthusiasm." At that moment, empowered by their shared vulnerability, Jack's response danced on the edge of a breakthrough. "Let's carve a vision together. Let's dig for facts, collaborate on approaches, and build a foundation that considers safety, education, and conservation." Each word sharpened his resolve, transforming the fear that had shrouded him into a thrilling endeavor, one that brought loyalty, trust, and openness into the dialogue. Across the gathering, whispers morphed into nods of agreement. The reigniting sparks of uncharted collaboration shimmered, and he caught sight of his father's expression soften further still. Could he back this? Could the hardened resolve of tradition yield to the possibility of change? They began contemplating the tasks at hand, the logistics of community outreach initiatives, the recruiting of the wildlife expert, creating engagement sessions that would not only educate but inspire collective responsibility. Jack felt the warmth of conviction shoot through him, wrapping him in a cloak of newfound confidence. "Let's turn our fears into a thriving initiative," he urged again, excitement breaching his voice as he instinctively stepped forward into the circle of community. "Together, we can do more than just teach. We can redefine our relationship with nature." An electric momentum had taken hold now. He could practically taste the exhilaration in the air. He looked at each face surrounding him, challenging them to seize this opportunity. "Join me on this journey. We will empower each other. Together, we'll create our legacy as guardians of the wildlife we've come to respect." The crowd seemed to swell with energy, an invisible thread of passion interlining their thoughts. Jack refined his gaze toward Janet, their shared traditions swiftly transitioning into collaboration. "Just think, if we bring our concerns, passions, and ideas into the conversation, together we'll pen a narrative only we can forge." Shouts of agreement surged forth, while Jack's heart quickened to the rhythm of collective resolve. At that moment, he unlocked a door he hadn't realized had been sealed until now. Each participant was a key that could open limitless potential. Then, as if on cue, his father stepped forward, possessing a stature electrifying the audience. "I see promise in this," he announced, words dripping with intention. "I want to support this approach, but with our family guidelines in mind. Are you prepared to uphold those, Jack?" Jack felt the tide shift. His father had placed a significant yet genuine challenge before him. A renewed opportunity to redefine their legacy. Absolutely, Dad. I'm committed to forging this through not just our expectations, but the awakening of conscious understanding. His father's nod offered a glimpse of acceptance binding the past with future ambitions. A wave of triumph surged through Jack as affirmation swept across the crowd, each participant eager to contribute to the change they longed to see reflected within their community. In that unguarded moment, as ideas began to flourish and connections were finally being made, Jack solidified not just a personal transformation, but the beginning of something far greater, an initiative rooted in awareness that could influence minds and reshape community narratives. The sun began its descent behind the backdrop of ambition, casting golden rays that reflected newfound brilliance upon Jack, the snakes now a profound metaphor for resilience. He was ready to claim this identity, not simply as the millionaire's son, but as a pioneer of ecological awareness, dedicated and driven to achieve what truly mattered. With renewed purpose igniting within him, Jack turned. "Let's get to work." As the community rallied around him, he felt ready, a firm commitment sealed in the clarity of his ambition. His journey was only beginning. Transformation had taken hold, and he was now poised to elevate those aspirations beyond mere dreams. As the final echoes of dialogue filled the air, Jack could finally embrace the genuine possibilities lying ahead when one dares to step beyond societal conventions. The time for dreams was over. The time for action had begun. Each new path forged through connection escorted him toward a robust legacy, brimming with promise and unyielding courage. Jack had not only conquered his fears, he had become the champion for a cause transcending everything he once thought separated him from greatness. Join Jack as he fearlessly moves into the future's embrace, because true growth lies in the unrest of change and the ardor to connect authentically with the world around us. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.